No, you haven't hit your head and are hallucinating, nor have you inadvertently time-traveled back a few decades. You really are seeing people use Polaroid cameras out in the wild again. The portable instant camera has been making a comeback as of late, a surprising revival of an iconic American invention. The Massachusetts company, Polaroid, was founded in 1937 by Edwin H. Land to exploit the usage of his Polaroid polarizing polymer, which they at first primarily did by selling polarized sunglasses. While the company was largely a military supplier during World War II, things changed forever in the mid-40s when Land's daughter asked him why she wasn't able to instantly see the photos she took with her camera. Intrigued by the idea, Land spent several years working on a self-developing film that could be contained inside the body of a camera, eventually unveiling his invention to the world in 1947. 1 year later, Polaroid released its first instant camera to the market, the Polaroid Model 95, and it was an instant hit, despite then only being affordable to the very wealthy. But throughout the 50s and 60s, the company continued to refine their instant cameras, making them smaller, better, and more affordable. By the 70s, Polaroid controlled almost 2/3 of the instant camera market in the US. But the good times couldn't last. Over the years, 35mm cameras became cheaper and easier to use, and then came the arrival of the first digital cameras. The popularity of the digital photography market seemed to be the death knell. Polaroid declared bankruptcy in 2001, and eventually announced the end of instant film and camera production in 2008. This was sad news not only for fans of the Polaroid product, but also those with an artistic interest in the realm of vernacular photography. That is, photographs taken by amateur or unknown photographers with everyday life and common objects as their subjects, including such examples as travel photos, family snapshots, wedding pictures, pet photos, photo booth captures, and even school ID photographs. The modern artistic interest in this sort of photography had been building since 2000, with the publication of the seminal essay Vernacular Photographies by art historian Jeffrey Batchen, who celebrated, quote, what has always been excluded from photography's history, ordinary photographs, the ones made or bought by everyday folk from 1839 until now, the photographs that preoccupy the home and the heart, but rarely the museum or the academy, end quote. This would soon change, though, as Batchen's essay kicked off an interest boom in found photography, with many agreeing there was a particular power and beauty to these images' unpretentious origins and compositions, and it wasn't long before many museums around the world were staging vernacular photography exhibitions. It's sad, then, that Polaroid's decision to cease instant film production came in 2008, right as the art community's celebration of vernacular photography was starting to take off. But perhaps that celebration and recognition of the importance of these sort of photos is also at least partly why a Dutch consumer electronics company called the Impossible Project was founded that very same year, purchasing some of Polaroid's production machinery and pledging to continue to produce materials for Polaroid cameras. In 2017, the Impossible Project purchased the Polaroid Corporation's brand and intellectual property, renaming themselves Polaroid Originals, before shortening it in 2020 to simply Polaroid. And so, the unlikely comeback was complete, which was great news for photography enthusiasts who love the nostalgic feel and unique aesthetics of the Polaroid image, as well as those interested in vernacular photography, who worried that an increasingly digital photography-dominated world might mean less and less physically tangible reproductions of our everyday lives. Yes, now with Polaroid back in the game, perhaps decades from now some young artist will find and collect the everyday Polaroids of today, and be inspired enough by them to create a fantastical narrative around the mysterious images, the same as an up-and-coming YA author was doing with antique vintage photos found at flea markets, right around the same time the Impossible Project was setting the stage for the Polaroid comeback, crafting a 2011 found photography-driven bestseller that would soon inspire a major motion picture. The year is 2016, and 20th Century Fox are ready to unleash Hollywood's latest young adult adaptation from one of cinema's most beloved and successful purveyors of the strange and unusual, and in the process hopefully launch the next big fantasy adventure franchise with Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Greetings, my mutant brothers and sisters. Welcome once again to Days of Future Podcast, the show about all things X... Oh, no, wait. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. That's my other podcast about a school full of superpowered children who the world hates. What I meant to say is welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Mr. Christopher, headmaster for the home of Podculiar children.
You know, I'm gonna give it to you on that one, Chris. I did like, you know, you know me, I'm a lover of puns, and that one didn't even occur to me. But yeah, I'm gonna give it up. I'm always a fan of a good bad pun.
Yeah, I swooped into the wrong podcast, I thought, but I'm glad you figured it out. I'm glad you told me. So
yeah, well, this is an easy one to get confused, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But no, this is look, it's a big one for us, Chris. I guess kind of. it's the culmination of our just 3-episode summer surprise run. But I don't know, this one, as we said when we talked about this when we first got the announcement, or when the online randomizer picked this one for us, it feels, you know, fairly timely for the moment, for reasons we'll talk about. But yeah, our third summer surprise episode is dedicated to 2016's Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Chris, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about it?
For sure. It is directed by one Tim Burton. Heard of him, you know? We've mentioned his name many times in this podcast because I think we have discussed Batman 89 at length as being an inspiration for so many different, I guess, trends and fads in Hollywood, chasing the almighty dragon at that point in time. So we have talked about Tim Burton a lot. We will today as well. But Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice is coming out soon. Jeez. Yeah. Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, Sleepy Hollow, Big Fish, Sweeney Todd. This guy has done many things in his career.
Don't you dare leave out Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Okay, sure. I'll let you have that one.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. It's fine. And we don't speak it. We don't want to make fun of actors, so.
I would never make fun of Paul. Is that Paul Rubens? Who you're talking about? Paul Rubens is the best.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I know. I was going for his controversy.
I mean, look, what adults do in their time is, you know, what do they think people do in those theaters? You know what I'm saying? Paul Rubens, okay. Fred Willard, all our heroes. Come
on. This one is written by Jane Goldman. She wrote Stardust, Kick-Ass, X-Men First Class, X-Men Days of Future Past, and Kingsman, The Secret Service. So, based on the book by Ransom Riggs. This was his debut novel, actually, in 2011, which is funny because in 2011 the novel comes out and it's sold almost immediately to 20th Century Fox, the rights holders at the time to X-Men. The budget of this film is $110 million. Domestically, it made $87 million, and worldwide, it made close to $300 million. So honestly, not too shabby. Not too shabby.
Not huge. You know, one of those modest hit. You know, or I wouldn't even call it modest hit. Just, you know, like what's a better word than hit in this instance? You know, just a modest. We did a good job or something. You know, like
high fives all around.
Yeah,
but no drinks later.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not like jumping the air with the high fives. It's just kind of like, all right, guys, you know, mission accomplished.
Like a good game. Good game.
Yeah.
Good game.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So where do we want to start? Because, you know, we got two kind of big elements here to talk about. One being like the history of the book, and one our history with like the director. But maybe we should start with the book because, as you were mentioning before we started recording, that this is also for us a return to one of our most dreaded subgenres of films that we cover in Failure to Franchise, the YA, you know, adaptation. So that's, you know, you mentioned that this is a debut novel from Ransom Riggs, which, by the way, I'm sure most of our listeners like me hear that name and go, that's a pretty good pen name. I wonder what Ransom Riggs' real name is. Looked it up. It's Ransom Riggs. That's pretty impressive that that's his actual name. But yeah, this is a YA. Not just one novel, not obviously because we're doing it on this show, a YA series. So maybe we should talk about that because it's been a while since we've done a YA, and we always are, I don't know, we're always kind of, you know, dreading, as I said, dipping our toes into this territory again. Yeah.
And first, I guess I want to ask you before we get into the nuts and bolts of it. You have a history of a Barnes & Noble's side gig. some may say. Was this in 2011 or even up to 2021, because there's been 2 trilogies in this series? Is this something that you can recognize? Are people asking for, booths put up, standees, like anything like that? Like, what is your, I guess, recognition with this property?
Yeah, my recognition is high. Like, I mean, you said up to 2021 because that's when the last one came out, but I'd say even up to 2024. I mean, these are still books that sell. And I recognize them. I have not read these myself. I'll just get that out of the way. Even though there are some elements of it that seem like they would appeal to me, and I'm kind of surprised I never did pick them up because I do read some YA stuff. I think I've said this on previous episodes where we've done YA movies, but I kind of actually think I like the YA books more than I usually like the adaptation movies of them. I actually think there's a lot of like really good stuff in that world, in the lit world. So I'm surprised I haven't read these, and we'll talk about like what they are exactly in a moment. But I definitely recognize them from cover and just from how popular they've kind of consistently been since they started. I remember the initial kind of hype around them when they first started coming out. And then, like we still stock them. I still see them getting sold and going back up on the shelf, coming in again. They're just like very recognizable. The covers are very recognizable. And so I know this series, and it was one that when I heard they were making a movie, it was like not surprising to me because I'd kind of clocked that as, this is definitely a successful series that people enjoy. And like I said, even at that point, I hadn't read them, but I knew it sounded like something that might be in my wheelhouse a little bit. Not just for like the X-Men of it all, like I talked about earlier, but also like the dark gothic spookiness of it all, which are like 2 of my, you know me, like my 2 loves are like X-Men and horror. And it was like, wow, this seems like a mashup of it. So.
Well, that's cool because me, I kind of wish what this book was intended to be that came out, which was a picture book. And if it did come out as a picture book, then I would have saw it and I would have read it because, as you like to point out, I am illiterate. And so it's
crazy because you create like the dossier for these episodes, but I'm pretty sure you just dictate them to somebody.
I do. His name is Kyle. He's a 7th grader.
Yeah, that explains a lot, reading your dossiers.
Anyway, this book series by Ransom Riggs, Ransom? It is Ransom. That is a weird name. Okay.
Yeah. Who names their kid Ransom? Do you think they're just a huge fan of that Mel Gibson movie?
Yeah. Or they held this kid ransom and they just adopted him by, happenstance.
Wait, Mel Gibson was in the movie Ransom, and he's in Lethal Weapon, which is about Murtaugh and Riggs. Am I on to anything here? I don't know. I don't think I am.
My Matrix code is all over my screen right now. My atmosphere.
If his middle name was like Braveheart, we'd be cracking the code here.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So the inception of his books came from his fascination of old photographs. That's how this all came up. So he loved collecting that stuff.
When I was a kid, my grandmother would drag me to these flea markets and swap meets, and I started to find old pictures, black and white pictures. I found a picture of a little girl, very old, and there was something that haunted me deeply about the idea that this little girl, that she had been dead, and convinced me that old pictures had this life beyond themselves that was really fascinating. So that was kind of a bug in my head that stayed with me for a long time. Years later, I was living in Los Angeles, and I found at a swap meet in Pasadena a guy who was selling old photos. I bought a whole bunch of them, and I got really obsessed with them. I had an idea for a story, and then they were part of the genesis of the idea for Miss Peregrine.
And again, he wanted to make this a picture book, but his publisher was the one that stepped in and said, no. Please create a narrative throughout this thing, and maybe we can build it into something bigger, better, maybe a big universe of books at this point. So the result was it's about a boy named Jacob who follows clues left from his grandfather's old photograph collection that leads him to this fictional Welsh island called Cairnholm. And he discovers an old, I guess, home for peculiar children. And here it's led by Miss Peregrine, who is the headmistress of the home, and she kind of looks after all these like orphaned children. There's another character, Emma Bloom, who's kind of the love interest. The movie, we're going to talk about what happens there, but they've changed a lot. So I'm just going to tell you some things that are just from the book specifically. Like I said, Jacob is the 16-year-old protagonist. He goes to a psychiatrist after his grandfather is killed, and then goes on a trip with his dad to this island in search of answers. And he stumbles upon this orphanage that is a magical orphanage, and these kids have peculiar powers. The peculiars are like abnormal characteristics. Some may say mutations. And not everybody has them. Like, it skips a generation, and sometimes when it skips a generation, that person who skips the generation actually has a power of, like, seeing monsters that peculiars can't see, right? Like, I'm correct in saying that, right?
It's something. I mean, yeah. I haven't read the book. I've only read the same thing as you, like kind of this like summary of the book in relation to the movie. But
like his love interest in the book is, like I said, Emma Bloom. The weird thing in this story is that the children are caught in like time loops that Miss Peregrine creates. She's an Imbrin. Who's they can transform into birds and then manipulate time. So they create time loops that are like sanctuaries for peculiars. So in those sanctuaries in time loops, you're ageless. So these children could be 50, 60, 70 years old. They could be 200 years old. We have no idea. But if they step out of the time loop, they will almost instantly age. So...
Yeah. And each time loop is like a different day. So like each Imbrin has a group of kids, peculiar kids that they're in charge of protecting. And each of them chooses a certain day and puts the kids into that time loop. So you might always be living September 4th, 1978. Or you might always be living February 18th, 1864. Like they're all on a different particular day over and over and over again.
And the reason they create these time loops for peculiars is to keep them safe from empty spirits called hologhasts. So this is all like gobbledygook, like
I was just about to say, it's so funny hearing you do this because like whenever we have to give all the rules and backstory of any of these YA things, it's just like they all sound exactly the same and also all like nonsensical,
Totally. So like listener, bear with me. I wanted to give a little bit of context going forward because yes, these YA books and movies have so many goddamn rules.
And if you're wondering if there's a scene in the movie where the whole movie grinds to a halt so that a character can do exactly what Chris is doing right now, yes, there is, because these movies always have to have that moment.
Totally. So again, bear with me. I'm getting out a couple of main terms and whatever, people. But the hologhasts are the result of Miss Peregrine's brothers doing an illegal experiment trying to achieve immortality. And doing so, they became deformed, gross monsters with like tentacle tongues and everything. And what they discovered when they became these monsters is if they eat peculiar children and consume enough of them, they will become whites. WIGHTS, which are basically they're restoring their humanity, so they cease to be monsters and more people again, except that their eyes are completely white and they look crazy. They can also like imitate people and kind of morph themselves into different people at that point. But the main terminology: peculiars have special abilities. Imbrins protect peculiars, and they are protecting them from hologhasts, who are ex-peculiars that feed on peculiars, and enough of them feed on them, they become whites to restore their humanity. And
don't forget those time loops.
I was just about to say that the time loops are there to protect the peculiars from the hologhasts. And when you're in the time loop, it's got to be reset every day. And if it's not reset every day, you got to do it the next day.
It's so funny because I'm thinking of like the story you just told, like when I was like, Ransom
God.
Riggs just had all these old photos that he thought were cool looking, like interesting. And he's like, I wonder what the story is to these. What if I just publish them all in a book? And his publisher goes, well, wait, hold on a second. make a narrative, and Ransom Riggs said, "Be careful what you wish for," and came back the next day and plopped this all down from, "Here's my narrative," and the publisher was probably like, "Ah."
It's wild too because I didn't even get to like I told you that Jacob has the ability to see these monsters. Like that's his ability, but Peculiars can't see hologhasts, so that's what makes Jacob special. But then his grandfather was the one that already has been to this home for peculiar children all these years ago, and when he was young, and he kind of like dated Emma Bloom during there, and Emma Bloom could like use pyro powers, like she was basically Pyro in the X-Men. And then Abraham, the grandfather, left, aged forward, met somebody else, and continued his life, having Jacob, who inevitably visits again and becomes Emma Bloom's love interest. There you go.
Whew. Yeah. I'm glad you took on that responsibility of all the summary.
I'm sweating. It's crazy too, because like that summary is ridiculous and long and so much. And again, I'm sorry, listeners, I had to do it. But there has been 2 trilogies. There's 6 books. This was the first book. The second book was released in 2014, Hollow City. Third book, 2015, Library of Souls. The fourth book, A Map of Days, was 2018. 2020 was The Conference of the Birds. And then the 6th and final book in the second trilogy was in 2021, The Desolations of Devil's Acre. Mm-hmm. And these were pumping out. Like, man, 6 books in a decade? That's pretty wild. So,
yeah.
I don't know. And still, like you said, still successful, right? So
when they're still successful. I mean, when they're making money, and like to give the devil his due, like it's a cool idea, right? Like that's what I remember about the books. Is like I said, I never read them, but I do remember picking them up when they were first coming out, and so what's the deal with these, right? And like the photos are in the book, and the photos are really neat, and it's Do you ever like I don't know how much you go to like shopping at like antique shops and like antique malls and stuff, but one of the weirdest things you can always find in the antique mall, but it is always really interesting, is like some of the booths will just have like a box of old photos, and it's always kind of like weird and sad because you're like, wow, these were like people's like lives and they're just like being sold in an antique shop now. But I kind of get where Ransom Riggs and other collectors like this are coming from, and that those old photos are fascinating to look at because it's like photos tell the story and you don't know the story, and there's just like this missing narrative there. And it is true that there's just something about old photos, like from the 1800s and early 1900s, that have this like really haunting quality, even if they're not meant to. Like I love going and looking like pictures of like old trick-or-treaters and stuff from like the early 1900s, and they're just always so creepy and scary looking, and just like there's something like really haunting about them. So I can't remember for sure. I think ultimately what he did was the pictures that are in the book have a lot of like digital manipulation to them on top of like just the photos he found, but to kind of add in the peculiarities, but yeah, it's a neat idea. Like I like I'll find these pictures, then build this like narrative around them, even if it got a little convoluted.
A little. I also love old photos too, because you're saying there's a haunting look, and really the haunting look is just because they're so fucking bored that they have to stand there for 10 minutes to take one snap. No smiling. That's why.
Yep. Nobody's invented selfie sticks yet, so they're not doing it themselves. Yeah.
Isn't that funny? There was a box of like photos at antique stores nowadays, right? Like, but we're never gonna have a box of TikToks. We're never gonna have a box of Vines. There's something missing with that.
I guess maybe that's part of it too. When we say there's something interesting about photos, maybe it is because it's like this like dying media too, and that's true. I hadn't thought about that, but it's like it's a generational thing that is just becoming more and more obscure.
Oh, for sure. Like this is slightly on topic for sure, but I think I told you this. It was a couple years ago during the pandemic. I finally decided to digitize all my home movies like that we have over the years. Like my whole family's we had probably 60 hours worth of stuff, and I was struck by how fascinating like home video was. Like even in the mid 90s, or late 90s, is because everybody's asking, oh my God, you got a video recorder? Oh my God, you got a camcorder? How much was it? Where'd you get it? Like everybody's fascinated by it. And also everybody's like so natural and alive. Nobody's really posing. You know what I mean? Like nobody's looking for the perfect shot or the perfect angle. It really is a moment in time that you are witnessing, versus nowadays where you have edited 7 photos before you post the good one. You know what I mean? So it's the whole movies thing is just wild. It is a wild thing to do.
And speaking to exactly that, it's interesting going back and looking at them. I've done the same thing. I've looked at some of my old family videos because we used to go on yearly vacations, and we would do the same thing. And because it was such a new idea, right? This idea of let's record all this, and there's also this mentality of I guess I'll just record everything.
Yes,
it wasn't let's wait till things are actually worth recording. So it really does become a strange slice of life where, on one hand, it's really boring, but that's ultimately what makes it kind of fascinating. That you can tell our dads were just I don't know what to film. I'll just film all of it.
Yeah. A lot of zooming in on butts and chests.
Yeah.
I noticed that.
You know what Liz and I have now though is we got one of those digital photo frames that you upload all your digital photos into.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it just cycles through them. What if they remake this movie in 40 years and that's what the kid his grandfather gives him one of those digital photo frames? That'll be the updated version.
Totally. Like you said, it's a cool idea. I really like it. I really like it a lot. Convoluted, but it's a good idea. Okay, why get Tim Burton involved? I guess is the question. Some may say Tim Burton is peculiar himself.
It's those feelings of people who are branded peculiar or different. I was just branded strange because I like monster movies, so what's so strange about that? You go through that in your childhood, you go through that in your life, and so I think there's a lot of people that feel peculiar out there. And I think that's, again, something that struck with me. It's a very basic feeling different when you feel that way. That's what the book is. I mean, that's what Ransom sort of built everything upon that. So whether you see the photographs or not see them, it's an important part of the vibe of it.
The guy is a goofy artist, he's an uncanny guy. He's a weird guy. And I think this property speaks to him in a lot of ways.
Well, I mean, it definitely speaks to his wallet too. I think, look, if we're gonna, we haven't had a chance to talk about Tim Burton in depth, as you said, but I know we both want to, so it's a great opportunity too. And I think you're right. At some point when they were looking at this property, the buzzwords that I'm sure were attached to it were gothic, spooky, and they're like, oh, okay. Pull out the Rolodex, and there's just 2 cards in the Rolodex, the gothic, spooky Rolodex. What's Guillermo del Toro doing right now? Oh, he's busy. Okay, get Tim Burton. Right, those are the 2 guys you would probably offer this franchise to. But yeah, like you said, a lot of it is exactly in the wheelhouse we associate Tim Burton with.
I think it really ties in with Tim's sensibilities. If you look at some of the characters that he's created in his career, even with some of his illustrated books, they're kind of not flawed superheroes, but they're abilities that if people didn't really know how to use them, they would kind of be anchored down by them in a way. So I think in a way it goes with his sensibilities where these are a bit off-center. These aren't your normal children. They just are afflicted with these peculiarities.
And yeah, I mean, so let's just look. I'm just going to list Tim Burton's first, what is this, 8 movies here, right? Is it 8 or 9? This is one hell of a run. Yeah. Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Beetlejuice, Batman, Edward Scissorhands, Batman Returns, Ed Wood, Mars Attacks, Sleepy Hollow. That is one of the all-time great banger runs in filmmaker history. There's just no denying it. If in 1999 when Sleepy Hollow came out, at that point you would still think oh my God, is this guy just going to become is this guy going to go down in history as one of our all-time greats and just so indisputable? And then 2001, he makes Planet of the Apes, a movie you and I will talk about at some point. The wheels start to wobble a little bit. Although what people forget is he kind of comes back a little bit because he does Big Fish next, pretty well regarded. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is divisive, I think, but I don't think anyone was oh my God, he's over because of that movie. And then he does Corpse Bride, charming enough. I really like Sweeney Todd. I don't know about you. I know you have musical problems, but
I will tell you this: I do not like musicals, but Sweeney Todd is something else. Sweeney Todd, I don't like when characters break out in a song and look at the camera and dance and all that. Sweeney Todd is just kind of belting out their dialogue and their lines, and it's almost it's more operatic. You know what I mean? And that's why I think I like that. Yeah. And I just think that story is really great. And actually, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but that is one of my absolute top Tim Burton films, which he follows up with the one I think I hate the most, which is Alice in Wonderland.
Right? So that's really, 2010 is really where things take a dark turn. And there's something else interesting that happens here, because if you look at his filmography up to that point, not exclusively, but he'd mostly worked with Warner Brothers. The bulk of his films were with Warner Brothers. And in 2010, for the first time ever, he works directly with Walt Disney in making Alice in Wonderland, one of their big live action remakes. And falling into like that Disney model, I think was... you can't say it was a bad choice for him because that movie made like $1 billion. I think it's his biggest, box office hit, but it is a travesty of a film. And it is just ugly. It's unbearable. It's boring.
Also, I want to say the only reason it made that kind of money was it was the next big 3D movie after the movie that is totally culturally irrelevant now that people don't remember ever, but it was Avatar.
Yeah.
Avatar comes out in December of 2009, fucking does just gangbusters. And the very next movie to hit IMAX 3D was Alice in Wonderland. So,
yeah.
I just want to throw that out there. I'm not giving credit to
look, ultimately, I'm glad. Look, ultimately, I'm really happy Alice in Wonderland did so well because it got a sequel, which means you and I never have to bother talking about it again after this. A sequel that I don't know if anyone actually saw. I obviously made money, but I don't believe it anybody saw it.
No.
But yeah, then the wheels are off. There's and that's not even to say there's nothing good after that. Like Frank, he does his like feature length remake of Frankenweenie, his short film, which is pretty good. But he also does like Dark Shadows, a movie we'll also look at. He does Dumbo, another remake nobody asked for. And it's just like. What was happening at this point too is even near the end there with the movies we're talking about, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Sweeney Todd, even though I said they have their fans and I think we might be counted among those, there was starting to be more of like, oh boy, another Tim Burton movie. Here comes the Johnny Depp weirdo role. Here comes the swirls. Like
the Helena Bonham
anytime
Carter
a director
role.
had. Yep.
Get the bucket of pale makeup.
White paint. Yeah, that was the joke, right? Like, I remember there was like an old YouTube video that was like showing like Tim Burton like what pre-production looks like in a Tim Burton movie, and he like they send him some script, and he's like, oh, let me get ready, and he pulls out his phone, and on speed dial he only has Johnny Depp and like white paint supplier or something. But yeah, any director who has like a particular style, like Wes Anderson or like these guys, it's just like at a certain point people go like, oh, we get it, we don't, and it just becomes so recognizable that it's hard for them to make anything without seeming like a parody of themselves. And finally, the last thing I'll say on this too is I think it's true, and I'm not the first person to say this, so I'm not going to pat myself on the back about it. I think this is kind of the general thesis statement about Tim Burton right now. It's hard to keep being the weirdo outsider when you've become very successful. And you're like a millionaire now, and you're living a different lifestyle. And once he became a brand, I think it might have been tougher for him to like tap back into that, the memories of like his youth and like the actual outsider status he felt. So like that, you feel that in all of his early stuff. And I think everything not everything, but most of like post 2010 has this kind of like corporate hollowness to it that feels like, oh, he's just become part of the machine, and he knows what the Tim Burton brand is, and I think it's more important. He's trying to protect it more than he's trying to do anything unique.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah. I will give a little bit of props to Dumbo. I like.
See, I never even bothered to see it, but
it does its remakey stuff in the beginning, but I would say that on the back half of it. It becomes a Tim Burton movie. Like, I know that sounds like a bad thing to say, like a brand thing, but it does like become distinctly his. And there's like a dark, I don't want to say edginess to it, but there is something weird about the Dumbo remake that I haven't seen with a lot of these other live action retellings, which are just, copy paste facsimiles of each other. So I will give a little bit of props. If you're going to hit one of these up, Dumbo was a nice little surprise. So.
Well, this is where I'll be nice and say, like, so to be clear, because I just talked about like what the general, perception is of Tim Burton, I think, in terms of that turn. But as I said, like even post, Alice in Wonderland, he still does do Frankenweenie. I never saw Big Eyes, but I remember hearing fairly decent things about it, and I did feel like him trying to do something a little different, just like a biopic, truth-based biopic, a little grounded than Ed Wood was. I don't think he ever like slid off as much as people seem to think he did. I think what really affects his perception is just that we talk like that. Like I said, that run of the first 9 movies was so good that I think it's just eternally disappointing to people that we can't seem to get back to that. Like what he was in the 80s and 90s, and like how different that feels in the 2000s. Like that's I think he still occasionally makes stuff that's interesting, and I don't think except for Alice in Wonderland, there's some other bad movies. I think that's his only like gigantic miss, you know?
Yeah.
Like, even Planet of the Apes, a movie I don't like, I wouldn't call it, like, it's not really, like, one of the most atrocious movies ever made. It's just kind of a bad match of, like, filmmaker with property, ultimately, but, or at least his take on it, yeah.
I think a lot of it, too, is that even his distinct style started to morph into that Disney CGI muted color thing. Would you agree with that? Like the Alice in Wonderlands, what I've seen of Dark Shadows, Dumbo, even to a point. I think because those were like his big successes after Sweeney Todd. Like, I mean, financially, I would say after Sweeney Todd, nothing's like filmed in a real place anymore.
Yeah.
And I think when you watch Edward Scissorhands, like you're walking down that street. Like you're watching the hedges that are cut into elephants and dinosaurs and stuff. Like those are real hedges. And in his later work, it's a lot of CGI gobbledygook. Wouldn't you say?
No, for sure. The business changed, right? And suddenly it became easier for, like, any studio is just going to be like, you could take an extra 6 months and make those creatures stop motion, or we could just do it CGI.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And I think the movie where that really started to become very apparent to me, as I said, and this isn't even a movie I hate. In fact, I think this movie is fine, but his Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I just remember seeing, like, the trailer for it and being like, oh boy, that's pretty CGI heavy. You know, like everything is like very fake looking, and just thinking like, man, if Tim Burton had made this in the 90s, he would have those would have all been like practical sets and everything. You know, this would have been like a really fascinating practical movie to look at. And instead, it's a kind of a CGI nightmare at times. Even though, like I said, I think it's fine. You know, it's not as good as the Gene Wilder one, but I think that movie's a little overly derided.
I think it's safe to say that me and you both have had I wouldn't say love-hate of Tim Burton, but I think
I've never hated him.
But we recognize that he became a cliche for a while.
Yeah, love-disappointment relationship.
Yeah,
I'd say.
I would agree. I would agree.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. You want to talk about the movie proper? Like, I think we can just get into it from here and then talk about the cast as we go along.
Yeah, let's do it.
Come with me. There's a place I go when I want to be alone.
There's a new world coming, and it's just around the bend. There's a new world coming. This one's coming to an end.
How did you...
Air. It's my peculiarity. If I show you the rest, you have to promise not to run away.
There's a brand new morning, rising clear and sweet and free.
Jake, right on time. Miss Peregrine, delighted to meet you.
He's invisible.
Of course. We're what's known in common parlance as peculiar. Claire, why aren't you eating?
She's embarrassed in front of Jake.
Don't be.
There's a new world coming.
Because our abilities don't fit in the outside world. We live in places like this,
There's a new world coming.
where no one can find us.
Jake, come and play.
I knew you were one of us when you were born. It's time for you to learn what you can do.
But I'm just ordinary.
No, you're not. You were born to protect us.
Promise me one thing. Look after them, Jake.
I promise.
There's a new world coming.
With his beloved grandfather's riveting stories about the exceptionally gifted children known as peculiars, ordinary teenager Jake sets out on a journey with his father to find the mysterious Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. Not that one. I meant the Home for Peculiar Children, a haven for all those born with unusual and extraordinary abilities. Persecuted through the ages, the Peculiars live protected from the outside world under the watchful eye of Miss Peregrine, who defies the laws of time, perpetually looping the same day every day. But the mystery and dangers deepen as Jake gets to know Emma and the rest of the residents, learning of their special powers and even more powerful enemies. Can Jake's rare peculiarity save his new friends? Let's discuss it.
Good. I would say the answer to that is probably, since it's a kid's movie. But yeah, so Chris, as I think you're aware, this was not my first time seeing this. I had seen this before. Now, I did not see this in theaters for a lot of the reasons we just talked about before the trailer and your breakdown. I was kind of like, by the time this came out, I'd lived through Alice in Wonderland and Dark Shadows, and even Frankenweenie wasn't enough to fully restore my faith, and I was just kind of like, I don't know. And it was the whole YA thing. But I did check it out later on, I believe. I rented the DVD. And you can probably guess what ultimately got me to cave and see this, and that is the fact that they did cast Eva Green in the lead role as Miss Peregrine. Yeah. And as you said, I think you've mentioned this before on the podcast, or I'm sure I have too. My all-time number one like Hollywood crush is Mila Jovovich, but my number two is Eva Green. I love Eva Green, and I'll talk more about her, I'm sure, as we go along with this review. So I was like, well, you know what? Eva Green seems like her vibe seems like she would have been a great match for like old school Tim Burton. And so maybe there's some magic going there. And like I said, I knew I hadn't read the books, but I liked the general vibe. You know, it has, obviously, you made the joke, there's an obvious X-Men parallel to it. It's like X-Men in a spooky gothic world. I like all that stuff. So I was like, I'll give this a whirl. So I watched it in 2017, and what I felt then is not too dissimilar from what I felt this time watching it. And that I actually think, again, sometimes these are the worst kind of movies for us to talk about, so we'll see what happens. But I think this movie is totally fine, actually. I think this is why I wasn't going to like give my thoughts away early on, but like I said, this is what I mean about how Tim Burton didn't go completely off the rails after Alice in Wonderland. There's still some decent stuff in there, and I'd say this is ultimately a decent movie that at times has some of that old Tim Burton magic. Unfortunately, I think what happens is it's like he's trying really hard to take that old Tim Burton magic and like put it in a perfect marriage with this more corporate-driven YA trope-built kind of genre, and that's where things start to really fall apart. I think the first half of this movie is actually full of a lot of really cool, interesting world building, and I think what Tim Burton is bad at is the kind of more action-packed third act, you know, spectacular stuff that these YA movies always necessitate. And I think as this movie goes along, it starts to lose me, and the third act in particular is like, it's just not playing to Tim Burton's strengths. It also sidelines Eva Green, who I think is its ultimate, like, you know, best element, and sidelines her entirely for the third act. That doesn't help. But yeah, like, I'll get into more specifics, but I don't hate this movie. I think it's one of those movies that's perfectly acceptable and even kind of enjoyable while you watch it. And then the moment it's done, it just starts kind of dissipating from your mind. So, I mean, I watched it for the second time last night, and I had forgotten like big chunks of it. And it's not even that I didn't like it. It's just that I like it while I watch it, and then I go like, okay, I don't really need to remember that. So, but it's decent, I guess. So I'm interested to hear if you agree or what your takeaway was.
Yeah, I'll cut right to the chase. Identical feelings.
Yeah.
Like, this was sometimes entertaining, mostly well directed, mostly well acted, sort of overwritten, sort of underwritten.
Yeah.
Good in the moment, ultimately forgettable. Like, I liked it. But like you said, am I clamoring for more sequels? Am I clamoring to get to the next 5 books? No. And the reason why, I don't like making fun of actors, Trev. And I know you don't either. But the reason why this movie does not work the way that it wants to work, Asa Butterfield sucks. He's bad in this. And
he's bad in this. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think he's a fine actor in other things I've seen him in, but in this, he's bad. And he does this he does that weird stutter to display emotion or awkwardness thing that bad child actors do. Like when they're like, "Oh, I don't know what's going on. Is this what? Well, you know, what's actually happening right now?" And like it just doesn't work. It's really unnatural. He's kind of a charm vacuum because I think what's her name? The Emma's character. Oh my God, what is it? Ella Purnell. I think she's actually quite wonderful. I like her. She's very charming. She's very charismatic. She plays that part very well, that I actually believe that she could be, 50, 60 years old, even more. She's got like a kind of a little bit of wisdom to her. And of course, I love Eva Green. So she's amazing. She's so good at being like proper and astute, yet like an air of mystery around her.
Yeah, otherworldly. She feels like an otherworldly person in real life, right? So she's like perfect for these kind of roles.
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, the biggest crime of the movie is sidelining Eva Green for the whole third act, but also just not having a character being played by an actor that is as good as what the other A-listers are giving you. Let me give you a taste here. Terrence Stamp's in here. Allison Janney's in here. Rupert Everett is in here. Judi Dench is in here. Dame Judi Dench is in here. And then Sam Jackson gives a hammed up, villainous performance that I just really had a kick out of, or got a kick out of, a la Kingsman, The Secret Service. Like he's so good at those roles that he can kind of just let loose and do like kind of like a weird affectation or something. But yeah, I hate to harp on, a young actor, but I was just so bored by that guy. And I just didn't buy it at all. He doesn't emote to anything that's weird that's happening around him. He sees an invisible kid for the first time and he's like, yeah, let's go to that cave.
It's weird. He gives every line as if he just read the script for the first time. And he's like surprised to find out that that's what the next line is. That's kind of like what his performance feels like. Yeah, it's
totally.
And I don't know. I'm not going to act like I've seen most of Asa Butterfield's filmography, but I know he was really good in the the lead role in Hugo, the Martin Scorsese movie from 2011, when he was even younger. So yeah, I don't know if this was like a director issue, like Burton wasn't doing a great job directing him, or just a bad merger of performer with character. But yeah, I agree. He's a weak point in this for sure, and that does affect your ability to get into the movie when the main character is the one you care the less about.
Yeah, you can't have Harry Potter being the most boring character of the entire ensemble. You just can't. You need somebody that has a twinkle in their eye that Daniel Radcliffe had and continues to have. You know what I mean? Some actors are really good when they're young, or not at all, but some are really good when they're young, and then they grow up and they hit kind of like an awkward stage. Jacob Tremblay comes to mind.
Yeah, I think maybe that's what maybe this was happening in Asa Butterfield's awkward stage. Right?
Yeah, maybe.
I haven't seen that Netflix show, Sex Education, but I know it's a successful show that's run multiple seasons. And I believe he's the lead on it, and I have to assume he's better in that. So maybe this movie is just the one that hit right at that wrong time, where it's I don't know, they're trying to cash in on his name value from Hugo and Boy in the Striped Pajamas or anything, but not the best.
Just doesn't work. It doesn't work. He just can't keep up with Burton's weird whimsy, and I loved seeing the nice blend of Burton's old school way of doing things and the new school, Disneyfication of big screen adaptations like this. We get a stop motion puppet fight at some point, which is great, which is awesome. Then we get a girl with a monster mouth in the back of her head. I love that. Kind of like Malignant. Spoilers, whatever.
We're past the spoiler line on that. Yeah.
Whatever. The strange Medusa twins. Love that. I love that the invisible kid always just wants to be naked because
a little freak. Kid's got issues, man. Yeah. He not only does he as a prank, he gets naked and has people sit on him. It's that thank God he's locked in perpetual 12-year-olds, because he's gonna grow up to be a sex offender for sure.
He's gonna grow up to be that invisible character from The Boys. Yeah. He's
got the power that Paul Rubens wishes he had, because he could have been in that theater and with no trouble.
Nice. I was gonna say a Paul Rubens joke with the dream head projector kid. He could be displaying those images for Paul Rubens. Anyway, but I think this movie has really good world building. It really reminds you what Burton can do, And I really was having a really good time with this movie throughout. But yeah, the main character sucks.
Yeah, my only caveat on that is like, and again, maybe I don't know if it, some people. It's also just true that some filmmakers do get lazier as they get older, and like more power to them. I've gotten lazier as I've gotten older too, But I was watching this and thinking a lot of like the subject matter and like just the visuals being shown they feel Burton-esque, but you can also sense that there's not the same kind of like whimsical camera maneuvering and camera angles that like the younger Tim Burton did, right? Everything just feels more locked down. And you know what I honestly think that is I think a lot of that goes back to what we were just saying is he can't be as playful because he has to have his stuff locked in for like the CGI templates, and all the previs stuff. So sometimes I just feel like his camera work has become a little like more like everything's just blocked, kind of boring. But to make up for that, you do still get a sense of the old Tim Burton, and like what you were just saying, just like the characters themselves and just this world. Like I said, I was not joking when I said I would really only think of him or Guillermo del Toro to direct this, because you do have these weird kids with these weird powers. Yes, it's X-Men-ish, but it's not quite superhero enough to be like a complete X-Men parallel. There is that dark kind of gothic element to it. Even the idea, and I know this comes from the book, but it's such a great idea. I think it's one of the best ideas in the movie, that their time loop is during World War II, and it's a day that the Nazis come and drop a bomb on this island. And so like every night they actually walk outside and they watch the bombs fall on their house, and that's when they do like the reset of the time loop. And I just think that's like such a fascinating idea, that like their home gets destroyed every night, but they go back in time right before it happens. But then out of the time loop, you see the remnants of the home because of the Nazi bombing. Just like such a great choice. And, like that's like one of the dark elements in this that is fairly surprising. Like, this is a kid's movie. And again, I'd forgotten this stuff, but I'm watching it last night and I'm like, oh my God, suddenly there's a scene where the villains are just eating eyes, eating the eyes of children. And the way Tim Burton films that is like, it's very darkly playful, right? That's the kind of shit I love to see in a kid's movie, where they're not only eating eyes, but they're like serving them on a plate, like a fancy dinner table. When he finds his grandfather at the beginning, his grandfather's eyes have been plucked out. There's some really dark stuff in this. And that's where you get the taste of the old Tim Burton, where he's making a kid's movie, but he's not afraid to let it get scary and dark and bring in those horror elements.
With such a horrific thing of finding your grandfather with his eyes cut out of his fucking head and being found in the woods, stabbed as well, you'd think people would care. The grandfather's son, Jacob's father, doesn't seem to give a shit that his dad.
That part is kind of crazy. Played by Chris Dowd, again, like another pretty good actor. But
Chris Dowd, the most Irish guy in the world, doing an American accent, and then they go to Ireland anyways.
I know.
What was going on?
But you're right. Like, he found his grandfather just murdered, and then there's a scene later where him and his dad are like cleaning out the grandfather's home, and Jacob says something like, "Man, you're not taking this as hard as I thought you would," because that's like his dad, right? Yeah. And Chris Dowd even just said, he's like, yeah, he wasn't ever as nice to me as he was to you. It's like, yeah, okay, but that's still your dad, and he was still brutally murdered. You might want to care a little bit.
And while suffering from dementia. Yeah. Like, there was so much going on at this time. So yeah, that was very strange to me. You hit on two of my favorite scenes, by the way. Like, obviously the Nazi bombing. That was like brilliantly orchestrated with the visuals and the time loop and all the characters wearing gas masks just in case the bomb does hit the house. Miss Peregrine is still looking out for them,
And even and I don't know if this was like a Tim Burton edition or if it was in the script or book or anything, but again, it's where it starts to feel really Tim Burton, where they play the record of that old Run Rabbit Run song during that, and it's just such a creepy song to be playing, and it's so good.
So good. And then yes, when it does the exposition dump of how the hologhasts become whites and hunt peculiars, and you just see Sam Jackson and his cronies sit around and gobble up a pile of children's eyes. And it's really fun. I found myself laughing at it, as silly and as gross as that sounds, it was just extremely old school Burton. And you can look at that and you can laugh, and you just know that your main character is going to be safe. You know what I mean? The danger is there, but also we're going to have a fun time in this movie. And it's helped by Sam Jackson's awesome performance. I think he's really good in this. He's always commenting like sarcastically on everything around him too. I like that too.
People always throw that like accusation at Tim Burton when they say like, oh, he must be racist because he doesn't cast enough black actors. Well, I'm sorry. He will cast a black actor as a child eyeball eating villain. So there you go.
A mutant Don King. It's great. It's great. There's a silly playfulness or a horrific playfulness to the film.
Horrific playfulness is a great way to put it. And that's like Tim Burton. That's one thing you can still say about him is that he's never lost that. He understands, which I wish more filmmakers and especially studios today would understand, is that kids love that stuff.
Yes.
It does not damage them. It doesn't like freak them out too much. Kids like to be scared. They like to be freaked out. And it's like, I'm a child of the 80s, and we grew up watching, like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Why do you think we loved that? We wanted this guy pulling out a heart and everything. It's awesome. We love that stuff as kids. And yes, when you show a villain eating eyes, it's not mentally scarring to us. It's just, like you said, it's darkly funny because we're like kind of obsessed with that. When you're a kid, you're obsessed with like death and that kind of weird gothic stuff. So throw it in your kids' movies. It's just fun.
Another thing I just love about Tim Burton's film style and his I guess visual language is he's not afraid to turn the goddamn lights on and up the contrast and use real sunlight. He doesn't shy away from other, how do I say this? He has a lot of confidence in being able to show maybe CGI that's not working perfectly, but in the context of the film, it's okay. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, there's so many filmmakers nowadays that have a big CGI scene that'll cover it or shroud it in darkness that you can't even make out what the hell's going on. But Tim Burton has a nice feeling of like putting it all on screen, turning the lights on, and saying, "Hey, this is going to be weird, and it's going to make you feel weird, and that's okay."
I think what you're saying is actually really important to talk about this movie, because I think what you're actually giving him a compliment for is knowing when that's like thematically appropriate. Because obviously the long time like kind of idea of Tim Burton was his movies are super dark, right? Now
Yes.
it's like people forget his first movie is Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which is super colorful and weird and bright and just cartoony, right? But then he goes into Beetlejuice, Batman, Edward Scissorhands, Sleepy Hollow, probably the apex of this. So we know he can make movies that are just like bathed in darkness, and obviously that is an aesthetic he likes. And even, as I said, the pictures in the books, the Ransom Reigns books, are all black and white, of course, and it feels like it's like dark and like, old school and otherworldly and gothic. So I think there would be a temptation to believe, I guess the movie will be like really dark tinged and everything. But I think Tim Burton is smart enough to realize, well, yeah, but Miss Peregrine is trying to give these children like a nice day, that they live eternally. This is a movie about like a kid's school, and most of their day is spent out in the sun playing. So like let's actually go for that, like in the filming. So yeah, I think I could have seen them going like, oh, let's make this all dark and spooky, but no, Tim Burton realizes that's not thematically appropriate here. She is trying to make this as enjoyable and pleasurable for them as young kids as it could be.
Totally. And I also liked him changing stuff in the book, or at least keeping with the vibe of the book, but changing things that benefit the story. And I think a big part of that was changing Ella Purnell's powers. Mm-hmm. I really love that she becomes like an airbender. Like she can control wind and air and all this other stuff, but she does it in like a really interesting, whimsical way. So instead of in the book where she just can like touch things and turn things on fire or heat them up, which one character does, so they just still keep that intact and show you.
They swap the powers of two characters, because even though the two names are still there, they just swap their powers. Yeah,
right,
and
right.
And they're kind of thematic place in the story. Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's more interesting than seeing page for page exactly what happens in the book. For cinematic reasons that pay off really well, their powers have been switched around and changed a little bit. So now Emma, rather than summoning fire from her fingertips, controls air and is lighter than air.
The changes from the book to Emma came out of conversations that Tim and I both had, and I think we both felt the same way, that it was almost the dynamic in the relationship and the fire ability just felt a little similar to maybe things that we'd seen before.
And what I really loved about the Emma character with her visualization of her powers is that she always has to wear these lead boots, or else she'll go up like a helium balloon, like into the air. And like her density is off. She's lighter than air. And there's a nice moment where Jake has to hold her while she lifts a squirrel up back into a tree, which every day she's been doing for how many years. And Jake's grandfather used to do that for her. when he would visit, and it's this cool little, this nice little moment between them. And I loved when they go find a ship that's in the middle of the ocean, and how she just like tosses her lead boots on, right? Yeah, that's when she puts the lead boots on, right? And then she jumps into the water and just sinks to the bottom, and then like blows out the whole middle of the ship so that they can breathe, and then shoots over an oxygen bubble for Jake while he's diving down to meet her so that he can breathe. It was just like really cool, and it was really beautifully done. And again, that whimsy, it's weird, it's whimsical, it's very Tim Burton, and he can really fit into this fantastical world very nicely. I was really a big fan of that.
It is one of those things where I could see if I was like a huge fan of the books, like wondering like, why did you bother why did you change those powers of those two characters? Because like I said, both characters are still there. It's just, you literally just swap their powers. So like in the book, as you said, Emma is she's got the fire powers, and then it's a different character who's like the weightlessness in the air thing, and he just swapped them. And I think it ultimately I'm sure it just comes down to which one Tim Burton thinks is more interesting, And we've had so many, like you said, there's Pyro, there's Firestarter. We've had so many like, people have fire powers. That's pretty like we've seen it. It's been done, But this idea of someone being weightless and having to wear the lead boots, and so that makes them always walk around like Frankenstein's monster, And like you said, like I love the little detail of when they sit down for dinner, how she has to like then, because she has to strap herself into the chair too. She has to put in like a seat belt, because you remember like, oh yeah, like even sitting down would be hard for her because her body would just naturally try to put her back in a standing position because of the boots. So like I love all the little details with her, and I'm sure it's just that he ultimately thought that was the better power, like visually for the lead character, so he went with it.
So what you're saying is when Jake and Emma inevitably get together, she's definitely a big bondage girl, hey? Gotta be strapped in there.
By default, yeah.
Yeah, a default bondage chick. Yeah, there you go. A DBC.
I just want to let it be known that Chris is the one who's talking about these young characters engaging in relations. So
yeah, these young characters, them together, not with any other adults.
True, and I guess they are going to grow up. Spoiler alert. But
yeah. She's, hey, you know what? In the book, she may have banged the grandfather. Okay, so I'm not sure what to believe at this point. So
now Ella Purnell, I know Ella Purnell is having like a little bit of a moment right now, right? Because she's in Fallout. She's like the lead in that, and she's also a cast member in Yellow Jackets. By the way, she's also the she's a lead voice.
Don't do it.
She's a lead voice performance in Star Trek Prodigy, the animated Star Trek show.
Son of a bitch. Oh my god.
But like I haven't watched Yellow Jackets. I have not seen Fallout. So I just was kind of reminded of her existing again through watching this. This has to be a correct assumption, right? Ella Purnell was made in a lab where they basically took human DNA and merged it directly with like an anime, because no one's eyes should be that big. Yeah. Talk about big eyes with Tim Burton. Come on.
Yeah, no. She fits the role. She looks super classic. Like super classical, and like the character is again got that otherworldly feel to her. Not as much as Eva Green, but it's
no. I'm making a joke about it, but it is true that there are certain actors who do have such a look where, like I said, and this is why these people become like she's become like a meme for this too, I think. But They also just become they can become stars off of this. They just have this otherworldly aura to them, and I think she does. And I think those kind of actors fit so well into a Tim Burton project. I mean, Eva Green is a perfect leading lady for him. And
that in Tim Burton's films, the characters are quite extreme and intense, and you want to do something quite big, but still kind of natural. So, on Dark Shadows, I talk a lot to Tim. I send him lots of pictures because Tim is very visual. So this is how we communicated. And on this one, he always said it's a scary Mary Poppins. So I watched Mary Poppins
scary
again.
Poppins.
And, it was to find a way to how she spoke. She's obsessed with time. The children have to be on time. So my character speaks extremely fast. In some scenes, it's quite a challenge and fun. And I studied as well, birds. Because Miss Peregrine, can transform herself into a bird. So I watched lots of documentaries on birds. How to, It's a challenge, and it's fun to play a woman and a bird, and it's only in a Tim Burton film that you would be able to do that and, you know, go all the way.
You know, I know I don't know if it's ever confirmed, but I know there's rumors about the two of them like dating for a while as well. It seems like, yeah, of course. Like if you look at his like dating history, it's typically tends to be the actresses who are strange and like fit that other, like, you know, he went from like Lisa Marie to Helena Bonham Carter, and then I think from Helena Bonham Carter to Eva Green. It's just like, yeah, he has a type. It's like it's these otherworldly
pale brunettes
women. You know, well, yeah, with what I said, with this otherworldly, you know, vibe to them.
Yeah. No, it's a good little movie. I mean, I don't think we're coming down on it really at all, other than, you know, how bad Asa Butterfield is, in my opinion. But like, what do you think
about what I said? What do you think what I said though too about like beyond just removing Eva Green from the finale, which does hurt it because she's giving the best performance in the movie, right? And obviously there's kind of, she just has the benefit of playing the strangest, you know, adult character, and just she gets to like really lean into like, oh, how weird this Miss Peregrine is. And you know what is actually, well, another thing I thought is, this is only 2016, and like it's like a kid's Disney movie, and I was thinking, man, she's like smoking a lot in this.
Well, it's a kid's Fox movie at this point.
Okay, yeah, you're right, but yeah, it's like she's constantly smoking a pipe, which I know comes from the character in the book, but just that was like I did clock that. Where I was like, I wonder if that would be the case if they made this movie today, or if they would like remove that element of her.
I think there would be a few things removed, honestly. If this was made under the Disney banner today, I think the smoking would be removed for sure. The illusions of maybe the relations between the grandfather and Emma would be downplayed, I think, even more. And also just like the slight gore. Like there's not gore, but like there is a big pile of eyes, like we keep saying. They are stabbing people in the eyes with tentacle tongues. I think it would be shying away a little bit more. Like there's a little bit more of a threat level to this one, and a little bit more of a you feel it. You feel it a little bit more that there's violence in this that I think would be removed nowadays.
So what I was going to ask though is, do you agree with me that it's not even that I think the movie gets like really bad necessarily in the third act, but I do think you start to feel more of like, oh, it's doing what these movies have to do now, where Barry Bench becomes like, okay, now we got the whole gang together and we got to go to this place and do this thing, and then there's going to be a big fight with the bad guys. And I just feel like you can almost feel Tim Burton check out a little bit. Like he's not as interested in that stuff. Now it's kind of fun when like Enoch, the kid who can make, this is pretty crazy too, right? Speaking of the darkness, where it's like he has this ability to like animate things and create them into puppets, but he has to do it by putting like living beating hearts into them. So he like carries hearts around with them and puts them into things. It's kind of cool when he creates like the skeleton army. You know, obviously I wish that was all stop motion too, but they do a good enough job of like replicating the kind of stop motion skeleton army in CGI. But yeah, so there's like cool stuff happening. It just feels like less engaging to me because I can tell. I don't think Tim Burton's as into that stuff. You know, it's kind of like he likes just, I think he's really into the kids just hanging out at the school. And I that's kind of what I'm into too. It's like, that's almost enough for me. And when it becomes more adventure-y, it's like a little less interesting. What do you think?
I'm with you. Like the smaller scenes of displaying their powers while they're just socializing is the far more fun thing. And that kind of goes for a lot of even like the X-Men movies. You know, like sometimes I just like
comics, let me tell you.
And comics, I just like seeing these characters shoot the shit. Like there's some of the best scenes of the Avengers movies. Literally, probably, I mean, you know, people might agree, but the best scene of the Avengers is like them hanging out in Stark Tower. You know, just being themselves in Age of Ultron. So I think, just seeing them all hanging out is way better than a big CGI battle with the skeletons. And you can sense it for sure, but like you said, there is still personality to those scenes, in my opinion.
Yeah, but no, there's a reason X-Men fans like love the issues of the comics where they just play baseball. You know, they play softball against each other. It's like, oh, here's the X-Men hanging out. Here how do they use their powers and stuff. And yeah, the whole middle section of this movie has that where it's like the squirrel scene is great. Like just the idea that she knows the exact moment every day that squirrel falls out of the tree. So they've made it just part of their routine that she goes out there and saves the squirrel. And then we see the other things like all the kids do all day. And like that stuff is great. And that's definitely where I'm more involved. Hey, I want to ask you this too. What do you think is the worst peculiarity? Like, what's the one you would want to have the least? Because we haven't brought him up yet, but there's the kid who can just like open his mouth and bees come out. That sucks. That kid got the short end of the stick in the peculiarity like lottery.
Yeah, that one sucks. the Medusa twins, that would suck too. You can never show your face, or else you'll turn to stone.
But they get those cool spooky masks, so that's
Actually,
nice.
The worst one is probably the dream head projector guy, because you know what? Sam Jackson comes to the house at one point, and then that projector kid just kind of like opens his eye. And then Sam Jackson like pretends that he's like melting. He's like, "Oh, you're doing something to me." And it's like, "Hey, you're just shining a fucking light in my face. Like, leave me alone."
He's very like funny a big moment, though.
It is. But he's just a big flashlight. So
I was just thinking too. Like, look, I don't know about you, Chris, but because this whole thing is like, and every night they gather together for movie night, right? And they're like, "Oh, he projects his dreams, and we all watch his dreams." When I was like a 13-year-old boy, I did not want to project my dreams for other people.
Yeah. Eva Green would have been in those dreams.
Yeah. I think it's also safe to say this movie, I'm going to go on a limb here and says slightly wastes Judi Dench. It's
a little bit.
It's just bizarre that she's even in this. Like, it was a nice little Casino Royale reunion, I guess. But I when she showed up, I was like, again, I couldn't remember the movie, even though I'd seen it before. Mm-hmm. And I was like just waiting for her to like turn. I was like, oh, when she shows up as another... what are they called? What are these bird ladies called?
Do you want me to replay what I told you already of this episode? Because I can. I will. I will do it. I'll do it right now.
Imprints, right?
Imbrin.
She's another Imbrin, yeah. So she could turn into a bird as well, and she comes to let them know the bad people are coming. They destroyed my time loop and my children already. But I was just like, it's Judi Dench. There's got to be more to this, right? Like, she's going to turn out to be evil. She's like working with the villains. And instead, she just gives like 2 more lines of dialogue and then is like brusquely like pulled out of the building and killed, which is actually kind of funny, but it just was like, man, what a waste of Judi Dench.
Yeah. Terrence Stamp de-aging effect, pretty good.
Very good.
Yeah, one that nobody talks about because, well, I mean, actually, people did see this movie, but 2016, this came out, and so did a little movie called Civil War, and everybody wanted to talk about that de-aging effect with Robert Downey Jr., but there's a Terrence Stamp de-aging effect in this movie where he speaks, I guess he's in the oldie timey-wimey time of the movie, and he is checking in on the kids and Miss Peregrine through this phone booth at a fair, and he looks like really good. It was great.
Yeah, and it works. Awesome. He's like kind of in shadow, so you can kind of get away with it a little bit. Like that helps
very smart.
Too. But it's really good.
Yeah. Again, Miss Peregrine's like Groundhog Day powers are awesome. Like It's cool, man. Like this is a good little movie. It's a solid movie that you can throw on. You're not really going to think about it much afterwards or clamor for more. But honestly, it's a recommendation on my end. Like I'd say, hey, check it out. If you like X-Men, if you like weird, spooky movies, put your hands together and check it out. It's inoffensive 2 hours, in my opinion.
Yeah, so to speak to the theme of this podcast, what I will say is I agree. Like I've watched it twice now. And I think both times I was like, yeah, that was actually pretty good. It's like I don't know if I'll ever go out of my way to watch it again. But I think if especially for people who have kids, and you're like you've exhausted like every other kids movie, and you're like looking for something you might not like know about, or you like just throw this one on because it is kind of fun. But I will say I know that from what I understand, like Tim Burton and Jane Goldman changed the ending around a little bit too to make it a little less like cliffhangery as opposed to the way the first book ended. And I do think maybe that even plays into, as you said, this was like it made a little bit of money, right? I do think it wasn't a huge enough hit for them to rush right into a sequel. But I also think the fact that it didn't get a sequel is kind of hurt by the fact that it feels pretty wrapped up at the end of this movie.
It does, yeah.
Which ultimately is a good thing for us, right? And like other people watch the movie because you can just watch this and enjoy it. Like we've done other ones where it's like, oh, this sucks. It's like it's got a cliffhanger that'll never be paid off. So like I don't feel as bad recommending this one because it does tell a pretty complete story and ends well enough. So I guess that's a good thing. But I think they also shot themselves in the foot in terms of trying to turn it into a franchise with the way they changed the ending.
It is funny that the ending becomes a little bit of a montage that wraps it up.
Yeah.
like it really does. I don't really want to spoil anything for people that are going to watch it, but I'll just say that you're thinking, well, how are they gonna get back there again?
Yeah.
And the movie's like, oh, this is how.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder because now that you say that, it does kind of have almost like reshoot, like, aura to it. Like, oh God, maybe we need to change. Like, maybe we need to make this more clear or something. Or maybe they're like, the writing's on the wall. We're never going to make a second one. Let's film a new ending that wraps this up a little bit more succinctly. I'm also trying to avoid spoilers, but I will just say the ending also makes it feel like Jacob just sure doesn't give a shit about his parents.
No.
No.
Yeah. Well, his parents doesn't care. They don't seem to care about anybody. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure anymore. We haven't really mentioned, but Ransom Riggs really involved in the process of this film, or at least from an outsider perspective, to be like kind of just gung-ho about the whole process, invested in the project, visiting the set, commenting on just what Tim Burton was doing. Like, he doesn't come off as he's trying to sell the movie. I think he just seems genuine about it, being like, holy shit, I wrote this book in 2011 and 5 years later, fucking Tim Burton is making my movie. Yeah. He's got a fanboy quality to him, which is pretty cool.
It's weird to think that we're in some way collaborators, even though I did my collaboration years ago and now he's doing his part. It's still sort of the marriage of these two, pieces of the puzzle. And I wanted to visit the set because who wouldn't? I love movies and movie making, and to see not only the film being made from my book, but Tim Burton making the film of my book and on this grand scale was something I just had to see. It's been like the treat of my life to be here and to walk into these sets of Miss Peregrine's house and the kids, and to walk onto Cairnholm Island and the village, which were so similar to what I had imagined, that I thought, maybe Tim had spied on my dreams or something.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read the book, but everything, as I'm saying here, I think the movie is good enough that if I was Ransom Riggs, I'm sure he feels pretty proud. It's like, okay, it didn't become the franchise, but hey, it could have been much worse. We've seen much worse butcherings of these YA properties. It's like this one ultimately turned out, pretty decent enough, and I would hope he's proud, because at least for a property that was built off him just finding these photos and it being this kind of visually driven thing, I think Tim Burton did a nice job bringing that world to life visually. So that might just be pretty cool for him to see those characters, because they said he swapped the powers of two, but otherwise, from what I read, the summary of the book, they're all here, they all have their powers, and they're all visualized pretty cool. So it must have been pretty neat for him to see that.
And he could go to the craft service and have a conversation with Eva Green, probably. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, if I ever wrote anything that got turned into a movie with Eva Green, I think I'd be pretty happy too.
Yeah. That really is all I have to say about the movie. I don't know how much more. My notes are done. That's pretty much everything wrapped up on my end. How about you?
Yeah, that's what I mean, right? I'm glad we agree on it. It's a fine movie. But I knew we wouldn't have much to say, and sometimes that just happens. It's not a movie I'm over the moon about, but it's also not a movie I hated enough to get really angry about it and maybe be a little more entertaining. It's just a totally serviceable one of these, But I guess that's kind of a victory, because I think what you and I have found is that most of these YA movies are not even serviceable. Most of them are kind of unwatchable and unbearable. And this one has two low expectations, slight victories going for it. It's better than most of these YA movies are usually, and also it's better than people think of modern day Tim Burton. So it's this one actually kind of strikes two boxes off. You're like, yeah, it's actually better than you would think in two different avenues. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, I agree. That'll do it for Summer Surprise. Pretty successful, I think. I think we got 3 fun ones to talk about in one way, shape, or form. We did Leon the Professional, which was awesome. Child's Play, which was fun conversation between me and you. And then this one is, it was nice to have a YA movie that was watchable.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, if we had to go back to this, I'm glad this one didn't make us want to kill ourselves.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. No maximum rides over here. So we are moving into fall time here, and of course, Trev, we got some themes. We love our themes, and this is a brand new, totally new adventure for us, because we have never gone into the foray of animation before. In 4 years of doing this podcast, we have not done any animated films. So, in the month of September, we are calling it Animation to Devastation. So, Animation to Devastation, okay? We're looking at Doug's first movie from 1999, and then The Road to El Dorado from 2000. And then we're upping it. We're upping it a D, Trev. We're upping the D. In October, we're doing Animation 3D Devastation. So Animation 3 Devastation. We're moving into 3D movies, Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within from 2001, and then The Adventures of Tintin from 2011. So there you go. There you go. I think those would be kind of fun because again, we've never done this before. I can't believe we've never done an animated movie. That's nuts. That's nuts.
Yeah.
Hate children, hate animators, I guess.
I think that's like we never done one, so let's just do 4 in a row. we go hard here, you know.
Yeah.
So
get them out of the yeah.
Get them out of the way.
Get them out of the way. All right. Okay, we're done. Follow us at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2 FPod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be awesome. And then just join the tribe, hit that subscribe, and let's go down the sketchbook that is Animation 2 Devastation and the computer graphics pixelations of Animation 3 Devastation. Off the top of my head, I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. I'm impressed you were able to do that.